I'm Levi Morgan, and you're listening to the Maniml Mindset Podcast. All right, you know what's kind of sad about this whole podcast thing, though? This room is it's Micah's old office.
A lot of memories made in here.
Yeah, I mean, every Bow Life show for the last 6 years was made in this room.
God, we're talking about him like he's dead.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
He was a good guy. He tried hard.
How's that evolved? Was he the original, or did he come into it as you all got into the seasons?
For Bow Life, really, he was, maybe not, he's always worked with us because he got in a lot of trouble in high school.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of his, like, dad one day was just like, hey, you're coming with me to Kansas to film because he was expelled from school.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how he started. And then ever since then, he just had a ton of potential, like creative, and just never went to school for it or anything. And then just kind of just every year kept stepping it up until I think it was like our first or second season of Bow Life. He was roughing all the shows, editing.
Yeah.
And then we were getting them polished by a guy named Jameson Crass. And then it was just like, hey, it's time for you to take over everything, you know?
Yeah.
And then once that happened, we kind of did a podcast with him the other day about some of that stuff. It like really put a strain on mine and his relationship. Like we got in the biggest fight we ever got in, argument. Like he quit, walked out, cussed me out. And it was just like so much responsibility for him.
Yeah.
But then like once he like did it and realized he could do it, he just like exploded. Just,
You know what? I think that I do hold the belief that every person is born with like a gift inside of them, like truly.
Well,
Like,
yeah, everybody's
yeah.
got their
now,
unique
you don't
skill set.
find it. Not
Yeah.
everybody finds it. But I mean, you watch some of these guys that have complete deranged mental illness, but they can play Beethoven
Right.
by ear,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm the same way. You give me boredom and I'll show you a handful of trouble. Like if I'm bored, I'm in trouble. That's
Right.
the truth.
yeah.
So like for me, I relate a lot to Micah. We
Yeah.
talked about that in Texas too, is, until I've started finding things that I could go down the rabbit hole on and keep me interested in,
Yeah.
even at like the smallest level, dude, I was my own worst enemy.
Right.
Because my brain just goes too fast. I try to tell people the way my brain works is like 3 concentric circles. And if I have a memory, it turns into a movie trailer in my head.
Gotcha.
It's not like I remember exactly what happened and what was said. It's like I see a movie trailer the whole day. Like the Texas trip, when I see that, I remember where I was when he called me, and then the phone conversation we had when I was in the garage, and then it just plays into like when you picked me up in the van, when we went to the what's it called, Whataburger.
Yeah.
Like all that just plays like in a little. It's like there's a little melody, but that's the way.
That's pretty cool though.
But that's how my brain works. But then the problem is that becomes the center circle, and then the other two just go 1,000 directions because it's like,
Right.
well, I shot those tack arrows. Well, what was the weight on those? What was it? So I'm all over the place. But when I could bring it down to like jiu-jitsu, where the only thing you think about is not getting killed,
Right.
I'm good. When I'm building an arrow or trying to watch an arrow fly, I'm good.
Right.
So I need those things that are like
Hyper-focused.
real meticulous,
Right.
because that's the only thing that kind of balances me out.
See, that's what's funny because I'm the opposite, and I'm sure you've seen. Like I cannot operate down in the weeds. Like I have to stay above. Like once I start getting, the deeper I go, I feel like I just stop operating efficiently.
Well, I'll definitely tell you. I mean, it is certainly a gift and a curse. Like,
Yeah.
I can keep going down a rabbit hole to my own demise too.
Right.
So I've had to learn and checks and balance with myself a lot of that stuff. But now my habits tend to be a little bit more, a little healthier choices on things. And a little smarter choices on things. So, but yeah, my brain still operates that same way. So when I see people or hear about people that like they got in trouble till they found that thing and it was like lightning.
Yeah.
I mean, I just relate to that
Yeah.
instantly because I'm the same way.
Yeah, Micah was like he was just a talented individual, and like
He's
was
good at he's good at a
everything.
lot of things.
Like sports. He was very athletic. He was like unbelievable running back, great baseball player,
snowboarding, dirt bikes.
snowboarding, but like he just never had that thing. It was just like he was kind of like searching for it, I think.
You think
know?
stuff was too easy?
It did come easy for him. He was fast and like just a really tough kid, but he just Micah couldn't handle like any adversity. Like he just would just very like angry at it, right? Like, and I think he's kind of channeled that into being great at other things too. but like he would just fight all the time. Like every week he was fighting and so it was like, man, I was worried about him because he's my little brother, and I always had, like, even growing up, I had this fear for Micah. Like I always felt like I would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic, even when we were kids, like Landon and Jackson's age. And I would go check and make sure he was still breathing. Like I had nightmares about my little brother, growing up. Like I just had to protect him or something. And then once you get so old, you can't do that anymore. It's like he's a grown man, and it's like can't protect him, And so to see him kind of take this and really make a great name for himself and just be the best I've seen at like creative stuff, it's like cool,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think anger, was probably my biggest driver
Right.
throughout my powerlifting career. And Louis Simmons told me one time, he's like, you don't see happy people getting under 1,100-pound bar.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that. And most of that is true of any passion at a deep level. Is like,
Yeah.
the happy people are few and far between. That's why I admire you so much, man. Is like, I mean, my perception of you is that you're real. You're always happy. You talk about your wife, talk about your kids, talk about your family. Like, you got it all, man. Like, so I admire that about you.
Yeah, I think, and it's like I am happy. I have so much to be thankful for. Very blessed, and I'm not an angry person in general,
But that's counter to so many people in the industry. People
Yeah.
that'll snake oil sell you on anything.
Right.
But then when you really meet them, they're just bitter or
Right, yeah.
angry or finger pointing or whatever.
Right.
And I'm not, it's not any one person. It's just there's a wave of those
Right,
people,
yeah.
So it's for me, and I'm sure for everybody sitting at this
Right.
table, as you've navigated the industry, most of the people got a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's how I was in powerlifting.
Right.
I was very much, I got to prove everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I want to grab every dollar that I can grab.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff broke me down.
Well, let's back up and talk. How did you even like the powerlifting thing? Was it like sports and lifting for sports in high school and all of that, and that kind of transition?
That's probably the coolest story of all. Okay, and I think it's a story that's real important, especially in today's time. Is this ties exactly into what we're talking about. I'm switched schools because I was a really good soccer player, and I'd been talking to a couple colleges, and everything I kept hearing, I was a single A school, right? They say you need to play in a bigger market, or you need to play for like a select team or something like that.
Right.
So even still, went through my junior year. And after that soccer season, I realized nobody's going to give me a shot. I had a really good junior year. Nobody cared, because it was the school. So across town, we've got a bigger school, and I ended up switching over there. They had better college curriculum. They were closer to my house. There was multiple advantages, but I didn't move residence. And right as the ink was drying on the paperwork, Kentucky, the KHSAA, installed a law on recruitment. Because of Lexington Catholic. They were notorious for bringing it. Well, this kid's just moved here from Georgia, and he's 6'8", and can dunk it from the free throw line.
Right.
Right. Whatever. So this law or rule was kind of implemented for some of that stuff, and I was like the only kid caught in the wake of it. There were 4 other kids that transferred after I did that got granted to play without moving residence, but I did not. So my senior year, going into my senior year, new school, to go play sports, to get into college, and now I can't play sports. Well, I don't give a crap about school now, right? So I start getting in trouble, starts cutting school, just boys will be boys stuff. It wasn't like malicious stuff. We used to have those ID tags, and I had a goal of stealing every single person's ID tag. So I put them in those baseball sleeves, like the 9-card baseball card sleeves. I had everybody.
Opens up the 3-ring binder and it's
Oh,
just
dude,
ID
no,
card.
I'm not lying. So I collected baseball cards hardcore. Like I had, so I started with Sean Kemp.
Yeah.
I started with his cards because along the way, some card shop had like 50 cards of Sean Kemp for 50 cents.
Yeah.
So I started that. Well, I ended up with like 3,000 Sean Kemp cards.
Oh, wow.
Well, I traded those for like 7,000 Dennis Rodman cards. And then I ended up with 10,000 some odd cards of Dennis Rodman and so on and so forth. So long story short, I got real heavy into basketball, baseball, all that stuff, kind of cards and memorabilia when I was a kid. So I had those binders, and of course my brain works that way. So I'm just sticking all these IDs that I'm ripping off kids. And I mean, there's, I don't know, 600, 700 kids in the school, and I had damn near every one of them up to the vice principal.
So when you put in that paperwork, did you even go to the new school, or you stayed at
No,
your
I
old
went to the new school.
Okay.
And that was the problem, is that I could have kind of pulled out, but I was, I'm too stubborn to do that. My parents
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, you should probably just stay." And I'm like, "Hell no. I've
Yeah.
made my mind up. I'm going." Again, better or worse. That's always been my mindset.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get in trouble for something over that because they finally found out who was doing it. Ended up, the last thing that was the kind of the, I guess, the straw on the camel's back, we had these electronic clocks that hung out from the wall, and they just stuck out in digital time. And I walked out of class one day, and I was just mad for no reason, or 1,000 reasons. I just went straight up overhead and went wham, and pulled it. Well, it shut them all down, the whole entire school. Fire alarm goes off because it was on the same electrical circuit board. So that was it. And I had this teacher, Mr. Lynch, amazing, amazing man. He was a history teacher, kind of a world civ kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he pulls me aside and he said, Lilly, he's a big defensive end kind of guy, football coach. He said, "What is going on with you, man? Like, what is wrong with you? You're better than this." And like, nobody talked to me like that. You know what I mean? My dad's awesome dude. Up at 4:30, like up 4 o'clock, out by 4:30, home at 8 o'clock. He wasn't a bad dad. He just tired. You know what I mean? So I got this man, like, I've always been really, really connected to my coaches. I think as a man, I was looking for that leadership, that role. Yeah. So when my coach says run through a wall, I'm like, I'll run through 10 of them for you, coach. They gave us steak dinners for the most people with the most floor burns. So I was into that. Like, I wanted to be that kid. And I was 100% like all effort, 100% effort kid, like overachiever, whatever that award was, that was me. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing my dad ever told me. He was like, that's all you can control is what you give. So that was personal. Yep. So anyway, Mr. Lynch is like, "You're better than this, man. What's going on with you?" And I started telling him. He's like, "Meet me after school, 3 o'clock, over at the gym." I'm like, all right. So I show up in there, and he just starts working out a little bit. He puts me on this chest press. It's like one of those ones where you stand up and you can it's kind of like a standing bench press.
Yeah, yeah.
So he puts me on that, literally no weight whatsoever. He's like, "Just keep pressing it while I'm talking to you." He's like, "It doesn't feel like that much, does it?" No, it doesn't feel like anything. He keeps talking. He said, "Just keep pressing it, keep pressing it." And it just got harder and harder the longer we went. But he kept asking me, he's like, "Why are you so mad? Who hurt your feelings? Who pissed you off?" Like all this like silly stuff. But as I was physically hurting, started emotionally coming out, started tearing up, talking, and like all of this stuff came out. And he said, "No, stop." He said, "Give me a hug." He said, "That's then. All of this is forward. From today forward." He said, "Meet me here tomorrow." So we started lifting, and it was cool. And he was like, "You want to go fishing?" "Yeah." So we go fishing at his house, have dinner with his wife and kids. And the reason I say that is because it probably changed the direction of my life.
Right.
A teacher that gave a crap to take a kid that they knew they couldn't impact in school, took me fishing, fed me, like taught me how to cook a steak, like stuff like that. I mean, people run at that stuff now. They're like, "Oh, he's grooming. Finest human being ever, because he's done it for me and done it for other people."
Yeah.
And that stuff is being lost, and I don't know where I would be without Mr. Lynch.
Yeah.
Like my legs are shaking right now talking about him because I don't know where I'd be without that man. So you can see it.
So you kind of viewed him as a father figure a little bit. Not that your dad wasn't there.
No,
but
and very much so. And I'll tell you what, when I walked across the stage at graduation, he hugged me and he said, "I'm proud of you and I love you." And my dad, kind of that old school generation, when he was fussing at us or something, he'd be like, "Well, your mom loves you, and we're all proud of you." He just couldn't say it.
Yeah.
Felt it, but couldn't say it. So this was like, what?
Right.
But it was the right thing for him to say, and he hugged me, and I believed it.
Yeah.
And through my life, even when I was off track, I always thought about that man as like, I want to impact people like that.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. And even, like I said, when my compass has been off, he's always been one of those guys that was like, man, he wouldn't be proud of this right now.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that was really the genesis of it. Like, that was just what started me lifting, because it was all I had. I had no other sport outlet. I had no other like real friend group. I had friends, but when you go to school at one school for 10, 11 years of your life, and you go over to the school your senior year, well, you ain't getting into the cool kids club,
Right.
So It wasn't a bad transition. It was just difficult
Mm-hmm.
for many reasons. And after that, I ended up getting to throw shot put and hammer in college. And that just kind of furthered the lifting bug.
Yeah.
I started doing some competitions and whatnot. So, really, I guess it was my sophomore year. I just didn't want to throw anymore. I just wanted to lift weights and compete and wanted to do bodybuilding. But to me, it was so subjective. Like, you show up peeled, shredded, and they're like, well, you need to be a little bigger, eat more carbs. Well, you come in a little bigger and eat more carbs. They're like, well, you need to be shredded.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to beat people head to head. And like I said, I was angry. Like all,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize this. A lot of this stuff was just holding on to
I was
anger.
going to say, so at this time, did you think you would kind of let go of some of that
Um,
anger, or did you know maybe like deep down that you were still holding on to it? Like, I know you having these conversations with this guy and getting into it probably felt some relief, but
it's funny, man. I think people like myself included, we get real proud of ourselves too quickly. You know, like, oh man, I've made some choices here that are good. I've made some better decisions. And you stop checking yourself. And that was always me. You know what I mean? Like I was doing the right things, but I wasn't always doing the right things. And then I'd have to check myself and come back around or whatever. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of get to the point where I'm doing okay. I don't need to focus on this
Right.
stuff. Backslide right again.
yeah.
So that progressed into leaving the shot put and the hammer. Just I didn't have time for it, didn't have desire for it. Started competing in powerlifting and did really, really well right off the jump. My first competition was great. You know, and from there it just kind of became an accelerated hobby.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't making money at it. I was working a full-time job, just got married, new baby, new house, great job. You know, everything was good. And then, you know, 08, 09 hit when that recession came.
Yeah.
And dude, I'm telling you, it went from brand new house, brand new vehicles, brand new baby, everything's fine to just like annihilation, right? Everything for me fell out. So that just led to lost my job, you know, tried to make ends meet 1,000 different ways honest, and it was real easy to get dishonest. You know, I could make money doing a number of things. So that was the path I chose, and it wasn't from being in a place where those were the decisions I needed to make. I failed to tell the people around me, those that love me, that I'd even lost my job
Yeah.
because my dad was always like, a man without a job ain't worth nothing.
Right. Yeah.
And they won't let you go if you're worth something and you're doing your job.
Yeah.
You know, but my company was actually dissolving.
Right.
So I didn't know that, but I took that on my chest. Like, man, I'm worthless here. Like
Right.
I can't even hold a job. So I kind of hustled around and tried to make ends meet. Like I said, you can't cover yourself for that long. You
Yeah.
know, and it went month after month after month, and I was killing myself. Like I was detailing cars, cutting wood, and still acting like I was working at my other job. Like,
Oh, I see.
you know, it wasn't good, and I was trying to hide it. So, you know, that just became a lot on everybody involved. And like I said, I kind of just went further into that as far as just like making poor choices. But then I get a phone call, and I'd done a couple powerlifting meets in between and done pretty well. So Louis Simmons calls, and he was like, I saw your last meet. You did really good. Good to see you. Look big, look strong. Have you ever thought about coming up here to train with us at Westside Barbell in Columbus, Ohio? And I was like, well, no, I haven't. He's like, I dreamed of you guys. Like, I've looked at all your stuff, and I know every number in the gym, but like, I never thought I'd be there. He said, well, why don't you come up and try it out? So 4 days a week, 3 days a week, more honestly, probably, but definitely there were times of 4 days a week. Me and another guy named Jake, we would get together at 2 o'clock in the morning in central Kentucky, drive 3.5 hours to Columbus, get to the Bob Evans off of Broad Street, eat breakfast with Louie, go train at 8, train till 10, eat Subway on the way out, and get back in time for work. We did that 4 days a week for months.
How old were you?
God, 27, 28 at this time. This is 2009, born in 80. So I'm
Yeah.
26, 27.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've heard other people talk about that kind of stuff, like just that blind obsession. Like, I didn't know why I was going, but like whatever was inside of me was telling me, you got to go. You know what I mean? So I just kept going, and finally got an invite. And that's when I moved to Columbus. And again, that was the best thing for my powerlifting, but it just furthered me from anything that was good in my life. So
Were you still married at that point?
yeah, and that was the hardship, is it was like trying to split it up over two cities, and then that just dissolved out. You know, it just did not. There's just no way to do that. You
Yeah.
know, because the demand of competition. I mean, imagine, you've got to be, let's say, somewhere else besides here, just so you can train.
Yeah.
Well, you can't make that work.
Yeah,
Hey, I'll be home every weekend. I'll be home this.
Yeah.
You do,
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't.
Well, it's hard enough just traveling for work.
Yeah.
It's strain on a marriage, strain on any relationship.
Yeah, and then you're throwing in, that's 4 or 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll be home on the weekend. Well, you can just imagine, hey, we got a powerlifting meet this weekend. Well, then you're the next week, and
Yeah.
well, we got this team meeting Saturday night. So
Yeah.
it just spiraled, and it really, it kind of unraveled, honestly and organically. And that's just a terrible thing for anybody to go through, but it just pushed me further.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like, I want to prove everybody wrong. I want to prove everybody that doubted me, said I shouldn't do this, said I couldn't do this. So back to my point, I think a lot of people like myself that use a negative motivator, well, man, when you don't have that, you generate it.
Mm-hmm.
You force yourself into, like, somebody said something about loving what they do. Like, well, if I loved training, I don't have to get mad about it. Like, I'm happy as can be doing what I love. I never loved training.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Really?
I hated it. I love getting my hand raised. I love being like square with somebody that should beat me and beating them.
Yeah.
That was me the whole time. Like, I was never a world record holder. I was never a guy that was like pushing the envelope of what was possible. I was a guy that would show up and have a strategy and lift to my potential, not leave anything off the table.
So when you were going through that process, like, what was your mental state like when you were going into training? You said strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, like, I go to work out and it's like my strategy is either to look good or lose weight or get ready for hunting season.
Right.
Obviously, this is a whole different ball game. So, like, what is that?
Well, if you can just imagine, roughly when you get to a certain level, it's true of any sport. Your competition starts to know who you are, and you start to know who your competition is. So if I see a guy, let's just say, Dan Green, he was a guy that I really got to know well and competed with and really respect in the sport of powerlifting. He was a 242-pound lifter, and he had like a 850, 863 squat, something like that. So I knew on his best day, and expecting him to be slightly better than that, 860 is what I have to think about for Dan.
Mm-hmm.
His bench was, 520s, 530s. So maybe plus 10 pounds on that this meet. So you just kind of start to build an equation of what your competition is going to do,
Right.
what they're capable of, and then what you can do in the face of that. And for me, the thing that kind of put me on the map, so Mark Bell, Super Training,
Yeah.
he had a meet called the Backyard Meet of the Century, and it was an invite-only meet. And I had actually I was one of the first guys to go from geared powerlifting, where you wear like a bench shirt and squat suit, and they're supportive. They give you assistance on your lift. So if you ever see somebody say they benched 800 pounds, I officially benched 832 pounds in competition, but that was in a bench shirt. So there are people that do that, but if they tell you that their cousin just did it down at the farm, like, total lie.
Yeah.
But for me, I did bench 600 pounds raw. That was one of my personal highlights and everything. But so for me, I was competing in one competition against all the geared guys raw, and I put up the best total in my life and finished like high amongst guys that were lifting in assistance gear raw, just in a belt and sleeves and wraps. So I hit Mark Bell up and I was like, hey man, like, give me a shot at your meet. And he said, well, you're coming for last place. And I was like, yeah, I am. But I said, I think I can compete with those guys. And he said, well, if you get out here, you can compete. So I did. And I believed in myself, like, completely. I knew that all eyes on the sport were on that event, or, roughly.
Yeah.
It was a big one. I thought, if I can just go out there and show myself well and represent myself well, I'll be okay. Well, more than that, I kind of started breaking down some of the numbers, and it was like, these guys, there's one guy in particular was notorious for taking really big jumps. So I was like, if he misses one lift, he can't beat me if I'm perfect. So that eliminated him as a competition, because I was staying like conservative, right? It's like if you need a 10
Mm-hmm.
or you need an 8, you don't shoot at the 12, you just shoot the 10 and
Right,
secure
yeah.
your 8, right? That was me.
So, but real quick, so I understand this. So in these meets, it's not individual lifts separately. It's like your total lift of
Your
all.
total, like some guys get really wrapped up in I'm the squat king or I'm the
Right.
bench king or I'm the deadlift king, and those things have individual like recognition. And
Yeah.
some competitions, like biggest squat gets $500,
Got
biggest
it.
bench, whatever. But yeah, I was a total focus guy. Like
Right.
I didn't care. I did, but I didn't individually care about each lift more than the next.
Right.
And my standout lift was the bench press, like where guys were 900 pound squatters, 900 pound pullers. A lot of those guys, because they had such long arms, and I'm not saying all, but they had longer arms that gave them advantage in the deadlift, or it gave them, they had some reason that they had an advantage in the squat. They lost that advantage in the bench press. So for whatever reason, I made up a lot of ground on the bench press. Like a lot of guys were benching 520, 530. I was benching right around 580, 600. My squat, where a lot of guys were squatting 860, 880, 900, I was squatting 830, 840. So I could stay in the hunt. And then down to the deadlift, it was like, well, who's going to jump too high? Who's going to play it safe? And who's going to do all this? So ended up, it comes down to I'm in the final, and it's me and another guy. So my first ever 800-pound deadlift in competition is on the line. 1,000-kilo total is on the line, and the win is on the line.
And this is at Mark Bell's tournament.
This is at Mark Bell's tournament. It's
The one that told you were fighting for last place.
fighting for last
I love
place.
it.
Fighting for last place. So I showed up, and it's me and another guy down to the last lift. And it's one of those things, when you get into kilograms or you get into meters, it's a little bit different. So the actual conversion comes down to 799.7 or 804.7 as the jumps that you can take. So I'd had some people say I'd never deadlift 800, and I knew if I pulled 799.7, I would never have pulled. That wouldn't have been 800 in their mind, and it wouldn't have been in mine because they were betting against me.
Right.
So I would have known exactly what I pulled. So it was 804.7. So this is like, I'm in oh crap land now, because this is like 800 was going to be like mentally and through
Like a
my
mental
training.
block. Yeah.
Well, in my training too, one, it's your first, right? It's the first time you're pulling. And this is like 800 is where I started separating the men from the boys, right? So that was on the line, like all this other stuff. And it's like, holy crap. And I looked out, and it was like, I had done a big meet, but this was like the first real time that I knew the internet was making the sport different.
Mm-hmm.
It was like every camera, every person with the phone, everything like this. But dude, it juiced me up. I was like, let's go.
Right.
So I pulled it, talked a lot of trash as I was walking off and everything. And that was what really put me on the map in powerlifting. And for a number of years, 2 or 3 years, it was just meteoric. Like everything I did was bigger, better, stronger. I was one of the few guys that was kind of talking. I mean, as you can tell, I talk nonstop, but I was talking about my lifting, sharing what I was thinking, sharing what I was doing. So I kind of showed my hand a little bit, and that was, people appreciated it. So it just kind of helped my star rise a little bit.
Did you and Mark have words after that?
No, Mark was really
Not bad words, but like, were you like, hey.
I'll give him credit. In that moment, he came over, and he actually, like, the minute he recognized me as the winner, he was like, I never thought the hick from Paint Lick would come out here and win this
awesome.
thing. But he was like, he sure did. He came out here and put on a show, like, give him a hand, blah, blah, blah. So it was like, I knew that it wasn't a mean shot, because Mark's just a shit talker, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to me, dude, I put it on my rearview mirror in my truck. I put it in my mirror in my house. Like, everywhere I was, like, you're coming for last place.
Mm-hmm.
And man, like, I don't go anywhere to give less than my best. And I will give you my best, but that's not last place. Like, that is the best I've got.
Well, that's the thing, dude. I think that is, I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love people telling me I can't do stuff. That's always been what really drove me, even what I do, But that was one of the questions I had, is in those meets when you're amped up and your adrenaline's flowing, do you, like, one of the things I was wondering, and I think you kind of answered it, is, so you lifted, normally you could go ahead and give guys more weight than what they normally lift when they're amped up and adrenaline. So it didn't actually, I was wondering if it would maybe affect their form or affect how they attack it, or
it's a fine line, man, because, like, I don't know how much you guys have ever been in fights or done jiu-jitsu or anything like that, but if you get so amped up that you get the timing wrong on something, you're really messed up.
Yeah.
So I would see these guys, and you see the videos all the time, like people slapping each other, smacking each
Mm-hmm.
other in the face, and doing the ammonia and whatnot. I listened to Promontory from Last of the Mohicans in my headphones. Literally, I didn't hear my name called. I didn't hear the number they called. I had a game plan. I gave it to a handler. I didn't want to do anything. I listened to that song on repeat for 9, 10 hours a day. You know, the one with the violins and the
Mm-hmm.
bass drum, dude. And I used to. That's a funny story about that we can talk about later. But that right there, I can't listen to it unless it's real. Like I got to be alone, or it's got to be real special.
Really?
Because that song, dude, I get so amped up. Like I'm an emotional person. You saw how it was when I was talking about Coach Lynch. Like
Right.
when I hear that song, dude, I'll eat faces. Like
Yeah.
I just want to get
That's awesome.
whatever I got to do. Let's
Don't
go.
play the song, okay?
As it cues in right now.
Nobody plays
But
the
it was
song.
like that was one of those things that was kind of like the mental cue that this is game day.
Yeah.
So I saved it for that.
Yeah.
You know.
Did you all? So it's interesting. Like, did you always have that like second gears? We were talking about this morning of like,
Mm-hmm.
you're such a gentle dude and just like you're kind of soft in a good way.
Yeah, yeah.
But obviously you've got this like killer piece of you. Did you always have that gear and knew you had it, or was that something you kind of discovered? Like, how did you even get into that song?
Well, I'll tell you. So it all goes back to when I was a kid. I was a dog when I was a kid. Like Pee Wee basketball, we had that rule where every third trip down the court, the girl had to shoot.
Yeah.
Well, the third trip down the court ended up being the last possession of the game, and we were down one. So I passed this ball to this girl, and I'm like, just like, oh, you got to just lay it in, just throw it up there, like it'll go in. She missed it. And I came over and I spiked the ball off her leg and cussed her out. I'm like second grade. I'm like losing
What a
my.
loser.
Yeah. Oh, it was worse than that. I had to spend a little time talking to some people after that one. But that's the way I am. Like I could not like. I played team sports because that was really all I knew. I swam when I was a kid, some of that stuff. But man, once I kind of found I'm in control of this beast, like it was, then I could kind of harness the beast. But before that, man, I had real anger problems.
Yeah.
We were playing we were playing a soccer game, and this kid, we were playing a reform school, Oneida Baptist, down in just over the line in Tennessee. And this kid, every time he'd kick the ball or whatever, he would take his cleat off and act like he was cleaning it out, and he'd smack one of our kids. And this kid was, I mean, he was completely weak-minded, like would never defend himself, nothing like that. So this kid just picking on him, and I'm wearing the captain's badge. So I go over to the ref. I'm like, this guy's hitting my kid in the head every single time. Like, can you just stop him? He's like, I don't see it. I don't see it. So I'm like, watch the next play. He kicks the ball. He's going to hit him. I just stop on the field and watch this thing happen. And he hits him again. So the ref doesn't see it. So I walked over to the ref, took my cleat off, and hit him and said, you see that? And I cussed him like a streak too. I mean, that's how I was. Like, I am not what you see now. And that's the funny thing about my life is, dude, I had to fall hard to figure it out. Like, I had to put the gun barrel in my mouth, literally and figuratively, to figure it out. And that was, that was the best day of my life and the worst day of my life.
Really?
April 12th, 2016 changed the course of my life.
What happened?
That was the apex. So to kind of go back and then fast forward,
Yeah.
in 2014, I injured myself in a competition. It was at the LA Staples Center.
Got the video.
Oh yeah,
I think that's it.
oh yeah, it's but huge competition. Again, kind of the whole sports watching. But this is after I just won a world championship.
Yeah.
So I spent another couple weeks in Australia when I was down there. Came back through Mexico, partied like crazy down there, and was really just kind of like a month removed from competition level. It'd be like you picking up your bow. After a month, you could do it.
Yeah, but
It's not
gonna be
it's
my
not when
best.
you're dialed in, right?
Mhm.
So again, this guy, Brandon Allen is his name. He's a really good guy and a really good lifter, but I didn't know him at the time, and he was an up and coming lifter, and he had challenged me to compete at this meet, and I was like, no, I'm good. I just did this meet. I'm kind of enjoying myself. So he kind of pushed Steve, the guy that runs the federation, to push me to compete. Not push, but just like encourage, right?
Right.
So it was like, hey, we'll pay for your flight. We'll get your hotel. We'll do this. And I was like, no. I'm out. Well, then he goes online like a month before and is like, well, I'm going to win the meet now because Brandon's not competing or something like that. I mean, it was like playful banter. But again, my mind switched. I'm like, no, we're going hard. So I had seminars lined up like Friday to Sunday every week because after that championship, I was booking as much that I could for those seminars. So that left my training like Monday to Thursday. And I was condensing, 8-10 weeks of prep into 4 weeks, condensed into half a week. So it was just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Go out there, compete, get hurt, and literally the world fell apart because that was like my income was not lifting per se, but the peripheral, the sponsorships, the seminars and things like that. I had sponsors call me in the hospital while I was in recovery and leave me voicemails saying that we would resume contract once I was back on the platform. Like that's how cutthroat shit gets.
Jeez.
I mean, you know that.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the injury?
So I was under a squat. It was a squat I'd done dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times. 744 pounds. I squatted it on my first attempt. I went down and up, and I had a judge's infraction. So I wasn't going to go too much more than that, but I was actually planning on going based again on the numbers I perceived he could do. I was thinking 766, 771, something like that was going to be a good day for me. And I'd squatted over 840 pounds at this point. So this was not upper echelon of my stuff.
Right.
Well, when you're not doing things at the upper echelon, like they say, most rock climbers die when they're just traversing basic skills because they're not focused. They're just like, this is too easy. That was me. I had been wearing an Olympic heeled shoe, like, a squat shoe.
Yeah.
And I went down and I had a judge's infraction over a movement. And I felt a little bit off balance. The platform I later learned was a little bit wobbly. So I thought it was me, thought it was the shoes. Had a groin injury that had actually happened when I was in Mexico, stepping out of the ocean, and it kind of like sunk my foot and then pulled me back down. And, so felt a little something there, nothing bad. So I'm like, west side, we squat wide, we squat in flats. So I had my Chuck Taylors there, put those on, widened my stance out to give myself a little bit of base, a little bit of stability because I felt unstable. Well, I stabilized my body and destabilized my groin. By widening my stance, it destabilized the leg. So when I started to go down, the groin kind of like flinched. Well, when you've got weight on your back and your knee turns 30 degrees inward, it's not going to stop that train. So it just kept turning. So the left leg ended up being like if you took a chicken leg and just spiral fractured it off the bone. My kneecap was maybe 3 to 4 inches up under the skin above my outer sweep of my quad. It had retracted so hard on the quad tendon. Doctors said, I don't even know how that's possible. But when they did, like, you could see my kneecap literally just moving under the skin. He also said that the snap was so hard on the front side of the patella that it looked like a surgeon cut it. He was like, I don't know if I can replicate that cut. It was so like just completely shredded it perfectly. So that was a spiral. It was everything. LCL, MCL, PCL, meniscus, whatever you can think of, it was gone. And then the right leg was patella quad tendon. So it was a little less, but still terrible because you're not supposed to be able to tear opposing tendons. But I tore everything. So, and part of the problem was when I went down, I didn't fall straight over my knees. I kind of like spiraled to the side, and that got some of that shearing. And then also rolled my right ankle, sprained the hell out of it. The bar stayed on my back the whole time, and when it came off, it dislocated my right shoulder. So I'm down 2 knees,
God.
down a right ankle, and down my right shoulder, and I'm in L.A. County Hospital, right? You got Stanford, you got UCLA miles away, but because it's trauma, they got to take me to this unit.
I mean, how did everybody react at the
shock? I mean, honestly, like I know looking back on myself then, I had that me against the world mentality. Like everybody was out to get me and whatever, but it was split. There were 50% of the people that were like, man, that is awful. Like, I really like that guy. And then the other half was like, good, that's what he deserves. And I didn't know where I stood. Like, did I get something I didn't deserve, or did I get exactly what I deserved?
Right.
And when I started getting real honest with myself, it was more like, you got what you deserved from a karmic aspect, right? Mm-hmm. So, nevertheless, that just began a series. I've had 19 surgeries on my left knee. All of that was condensed into 4 years. So, really, 14 to 16 is what we're talking about. January 14 to April of 16 was 2 of the worst years of my life. And what people don't understand about those 19 surgeries, that sounds bad enough in and of itself, right? Well, when you do the math, I was on my back 4 weeks every surgery.
Mm.
So it's 76 weeks
Yeah.
out of 4 years that I was on my back. And primarily the first 2 years, that was the brunt of it. You know, I would literally get healthy, get back on my feet, and then a week later, I'm back in the hospital, another infection. It was just infection after infection after infection. They had me at threshold levels of some of the antibiotics I was taking. I had PICC lines multiple times. I realized I tried to tried to off myself one time that I didn't know I was trying to off myself. I bought a dirt bike. It was a KTM 252 stroke.
Oh, yeah.
Used to ride all the time, but like why? Like why am I buying this with at this point probably 8, 9, 10 surgeries on my knee, wanting to go fast, wanting to lose weight, wanting to do all this stuff. I go out and I literally jump it the first time, and I just tabletop it and shelf myself, totally like rolled myself in a knee brace, PICC line in my arm. I'm sitting there laying in dirt, and I was like, that was stupid. But I got up and did it again, and I couldn't tell you why I did it again, but unless
Yeah.
you really start thinking, man, I just didn't want to live. I didn't care, because shortly thereafter is when I put the gun in my mouth. But the best thing that came from that, I called my dad, and we were very, very strained at the time because of all the stuff I was talking about. We were just very distant. Not trying to make it worse than it is, but like it wasn't normal. You know what I mean? So he comes in and he just kind of looked at me, and I knew I was in bad shape. I'm just surgery after surgery. I've lost weight. They got me on so many pain pills. Like that was messing up my thinking. That was messing up how I looked. You know what I mean? Just not in a good place. He said, man, I should have told you every single day that I was proud of you and I love you. And I'm sorry that we got here. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
holy crap, my dad just changed my universe, because I thought I had to be this tough guy that was fighting the world because that's what men do, right? Like I thought it was me against everybody, and I'm out here on my own. When I had to go up here to lift and do that kind of stuff, nobody in my family came with me. It's me against the wolves. That's the kind of crap.
Right.
Did it take some time for your dad to come around like that, or was that kind of like in the...
No, dude. As soon as he saw me, it was that way. Like I said, my dad is an awesome dude.
Right,
And
yeah.
what's the saying? When you're 16, your dad's an idiot. And when you're 30, your dad's the smartest man you ever
Yeah.
met.
Right.
That's a lot of our story. When I was younger, he was killing himself working, so I didn't get to know him like that. But as I've gotten to be a man and really just sat down and had conversations with him, not as my dad, but as David, like that's a different level.
Yeah.
Both of them important but different. And that was who was talking to me that day, and I think that was the buffer that he needed, because I think if he was talking to me as his son, he couldn't have gotten the words out. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's what I got from him was, man, you can say you're sorry. You can own that you made mistakes. You're not perfect. So that started to actually be like breathing room for myself, because I was so intent on like, I've got to prove everyone wrong here. I've got to show everyone that all this effort and all this hurt and all this time was worth it.
At that time, did you have a community of people around you, or were you kind of just by yourself?
I had teammates, but I am the worst teammate ever. I mean, honestly, like I can say that about myself. I push too hard. I don't give enough, kind of thing. Like I'll give you all I got, but it's never what you need, because I'm just giving you what I want to give you, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think looking back, I think I was a pretty poor teammate as far as like as much as I could have done. But from a strategy, from the percentages and some of the coaching stuff, I think I was great. So I would rather train with a guy who made me better, that I wanted to fight every single day, than a guy who made me feel good about myself and
Right,
I
yeah.
stayed the same. So that's the way I coached. Even my athletes. Like I can remember one guy, he sent me a message. He's like, I want to be one of the best lifters in the world. And his first workout reply was, well, I got to the gym late and I had to cut it short. And I was like, we're done here. Like, you don't want to be the best in the world. And I'm not saying that you did the wrong thing. You lied to me on your questionnaire. You do not want to be the best in the world. So I held everybody to a standard that I held myself to.
You're right. Yeah.
And man, that's dangerous because it's a hard place for people to get to, and it's very hard for people to get close to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was very
Expectations are difficult.
yeah, for
'Cause
sure.
it's like I wasn't at that level, but I always find myself putting expectations. Like if I do something, and I've had to break myself at this. Like if I do something for you, or if I give you something, I would always have the I expect that back from you.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't operate like that. Like just because I'm doing something, I can't look at you and say, you owe me now. It's like, no, you don't owe me anything. I should just be able to do it. And then if you do it back, great. But if not, that's all right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think those expectations as a teammate are great. I think sometimes it drives people around you to be better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like Michael Jordan, he was not a fun teammate.
mm-hmm.
You know, but he demanded the same level of discipline by his teammates that he was putting in.
Right.
You know, and like all those documentaries you look and they're like he was the worst. Like I hated him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but he drove everybody to excellence because he demanded it. You know.
Yeah,
So I think in certain scenarios, it's a good thing.
yeah, and I think just an honest kind of like pedigree. I was a student of the West Side system. I mean, the stories out of that place are legendary for how they treated people. As far as like, if you couldn't hack it, get out. Like,
Right.
there's no second day if you can't make it the first. Kind of thing. So again, all my coaches that I really relished and surpassed my own expectations under were the kind that grab you by the collar and get in your face and be like, "You're better than this, boy. You can do better than this." So I thrived on that.
Yeah.
So being in that environment and powerlifting at a high level, like everybody in here, I'm looking around. Well, the only competition I have at the competition is every guy in this room, and they all want to kill me.
Yeah.
And, so it's like when your training environment is literally your competition, that is a breeding ground for its own level of like mental warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gets to another level of exhaustion when you're talking about lifting 1,100 pounds on your back in a squat, and then everybody's just kind of like mad at each other, or pushing to beat each other, or whatever it is. It's a weird environment where nobody's happy, but everybody's getting better. It's weird, very, very, very weird.
So in that world, I'm just like moving that amount of weight, and guys, like we were watching videos of you earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Just you look a different person.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even recognize that was you. I'm just gonna add, is steroids a thing there? Is it?
Oh, for sure. And
Is it a necessary evil? I guess.
No, I mean there's avenues under the sun to compete non-test, or to compete tested. You can have a very stringent drug testing like the IPF, the USAPL. But anyway, they have their own federation, and it's huge. It does very well. What I think people realize or don't realize. So in my situation, for example, I did a competition, and it was one of the first competitions I did. Happened to set a record, and they did a little dip test for your urine, and it was like if you have a 6-to-1 testosterone to estrogen ratio, it'll register a different color. So if you're under 6-to-1, you're good. If you're over 6-to-1, you're high. So I'm like 19 years old. I had some whey protein, some creatine and stuff, and my dad actually made me throw it out. I was home from college and I had to throw away supplements because they thought they were steroids. So I was not on steroids, not at all. But this test said I was, and I was 19 years old. I was 219, and I squatted 660, bench 440, and deadlifted 670.
Good gosh, dude.
Yeah, so
At 19.
19, and so that discredited my lifts, and it was put like in I don't know, it's called Powerlifting USA, but it was like disqualified, and it like failed drug tests. So I'm 19 years old, having done one of my first powerlifting meets, and I think every eye that reads that magazine is like scanning that to be like, what did Brandon Lilly do? Like that's how I kind of had that like visions of grandeur about about everything I've ever done. I wanted to be the best.
Yeah.
So I thought people would like see that, and I was embarrassed. So I was like, well, I'll show them. And it started right after that. And to be honest with you, when I was at the end of my career, I saw a lot of what I would just be like internet driven abuse, like people just talking about numbers casually of dosages that they take, not realizing that if you tell me what release to use, I'm going to buy that release.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because he's the best in the world at it.
Right.
So if you look up to someone, or they have a physique that you want, or they're strong as you want to be, or whatever, obviously if they say, well, I do this, you write it down and you go do that. And that was the thing that I think got really out of hand, because just like anything, it's an arms race.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, if he's doing that, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do a little bit more.
One up it.
And the numbers relative to what I did got so out of control. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that towards the end, like 12-week cycle, 10 of it looks like TRT, honestly. Like maybe TRT 2.0.
Right.
Very, very basic, very straightforward. You want to keep your body balanced. Like you don't want to have these extremes. What you want is maximum level of balance at an extreme, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the more good stuff you do, the more counteractive stuff you have to do. And what you end up with is kind of a pretty rank soup at that point. So I always thought less is more, stay within those boundaries. And I asked my first coach that helped me with that stuff, I said, how long do I do this amount? And he said, until it stops working. And that was it. Like it never stopped working. So we just barely, like slowly crept the number forward to where, to what I'm taking now on TRT, I was at or just below 2 times what I'm taking right now. At my highest, at the ends of competition, I was 5 to 6 times what I take right now. But it was kind of a ramp up just for the event. I know that there were guys, and this is not an accusation. This is not me saying negatively of them. I'm just saying I think it's a problem that evolved because of the internet and people playing that arms race. Guys were cruising on 4 times what TRT is, 5 times what TRT is. And that's really, it's not a functional thing. So what people don't understand, your body can only process and assimilate so much of that stuff, right? So if you're feeding it protein, really all a steroid or anabolic does really well is help you synthesize recovery through protein synthesis, right? So you have to eat the food, you have to train to stimulate and break down the muscle. The steroids and the anabolics obviously help with that. They don't just make you stronger for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you took them and did nothing, you would get stronger a little bit, but if you do something with that, the mechanism works better. It's not just strength because you want to get stronger. It is strength because it allows you to become stronger by building a muscle through protein synthesis that can be strengthened. So that was always my angle on it. Was like this, more of this isn't going to make me better. More discipline with the little bit I'm taking is going to make me better. Eat the protein you're supposed to eat the calories you're supposed to eat, whatever you got to do, just utilize it and you won't need more. I feel like it covers a lot of mistakes. Like you can eat really, really poorly and take more and then curb that.
Right.
So I tried to, I definitely had those days too, but I tried to get, for the most part, I tried to eat really, really good and train really, really hard. So not saying my use is any different than anyone else's. That was my values around it, was use the least that you have to get better.
Right.
So after your injury in like the 4-year span of the surgeries and everything, were you planning on going back or did you know it was over?
Oh, dude, this is how stupid I am. So the day I had the surgery, maybe it was just the fact of my surroundings at LA County Medical Center, but when I get triaged in there, there's a woman with a gunshot hole in her face and her boyfriend's handcuffed to the rail, and they're in the triage with me arguing still. He shot her in the face and he's handcuffed to the rail. That was my surroundings there. So
Jeez.
Cool story. Do you remember way back the guy at USC that dropped the bench press bar on his throat?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy that did that kid's surgery walks in and is like, oh, I'm volunteering time at the LA County Medical Hospital. He's like a very, very world-renowned surgeon. He's actually a hand specialist, and that's why they brought him in on that, because they said hand specialists have the most intricate, detailed
Really?
requirements as a surgeon. I'm sure like his people said that, but I'm sure somebody on their brain or on the heart, they're mad at me for saying that. But nevertheless, it's a very intricate surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually comes in and jokes with me. He goes, I'm going to go read a medical book on how to do knee surgery. I'll be back in an hour and we'll get you cut up, But so he was Chinese, and there was a very, 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 very hard language barrier there. Like it was English to a level that I could not comprehend. Okay. And I'm not saying that callously. I'm just saying that to tell the rest of the story. The rest of my nursing staff was Hispanic. So that was a language barrier in of its own, Chinese to Spanish, Spanish to English, Chinese to English. I was given missed medications. I was given things that could have like really given me complications being mixed together, because nothing there. It's a county hospital in LA. Like it's Turdsville. Like, let's be
And are
honest.
you there by yourself, or do
Yeah.
you have people like
No.
like your dad?
No,
just you there by yourself.
This is like before anything got good. So this is like rock bottom days, even though I'm still on top, right? And that's when it became really, really clear. I had a business partner that came around and brought me some stuff, and without that, I would have been in really bad shape. So the first night I'm at the nurse's station. They don't even have a room for me. They just have like a curtain pulled around me at the nurse's station. The next night they put me in a room in an oxygen unit upstairs that's for like premature children. So, and they forget about me. Well, there's no call button for pain meds. The phone doesn't work and I can't walk. But throughout the course of all this stuff going on, whenever I had the surgery, the surgeon looked at me and he was like, I said, you know, of course, am I ever going to be able to do this again? Right. He said, you'll be lucky to walk inside 10 months. Well, like a bolt of lightning, 7, 8 minutes after that, I get a text message from a guy in Australia. And he was like, hey, mate, if you're up and around, you can make it. Love to have you down even as a guest, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm lifting. Because it was 10 months to the day that I fell. And that doctor told me I wouldn't walk for 10 months. So I went down there in 10 months to the day, 3 surgeries later, squatted 661, bench 540 something, and deadlifted 7 something.
Are you kidding me?
No, 3 months to the day. I went back to Mark Bell's meet. I squatted 111. I benched 500 and I pulled 711 to G's and Hustles by Snoop Dogg. And at the end of it, I was talking so much trash, telling everybody I'm coming back. You can't stop me, can't whoop me, nothing. I was just running my mouth, but it was, yeah, man, I was like, but it was fear. Like it was totally fear because it was like, I saw how quickly I was forgotten.
Yeah.
And dude, when that was put in my face and I'm like, I don't know where my next payment comes from. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know where this comes.
Mm-hmm.
So it got scary quick. So it was like, I got to compete. And my doctor's like, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm just going to go squat 100 pounds and pull 700. He's like, you're crazy. To the point that I had a straight cast on one time and they left the knee open, like kind of like a little oval in the knee. So I deadlifted 500 pounds straight legged and shot sebaceous fluid like 7, 8 feet across the gym because the pressure in my knee built up so much through that lift. I was training so hard. I had like the little scab on the tip of my knee and it popped off and then just fluid just started shooting out of my knee. That's how crazy but it was all like looking back at it, I can laugh now. Dude, I was scared to death. I was literally scared to death. I didn't know what I was going to do and I was not good at anything else.
Like you had no plan B.
Never.
Yeah.
No.
It's so funny. We talked about that last night on a different podcast. It's just such a consistent thing with people that are just great, the best at what they do. They just don't have any other option but to be great at it.
Well, I think it's belief in self too. Mm-hmm. Like I'm telling you, I followed my gut, and that's really in my job. Even that's where a lot of my stuff revolves around is my gut feeling on things or on people. That's a good arrow for me. Like I follow that compass. So, you know, when I'm looking at myself, like, geez, that all the things that I have done, when you write them down, I'm like, man, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely believe every bit of it.
Yeah.
You know, because I never thought I couldn't. And that's what I was saying. When I first got a street bike, I'm skinnying down to like 170, buying racing leathers and wanting to turn corners and, you know, drag my knees.
Right, yeah.
That kind of thing. I just never wanted to do something. Like, why am I going to give you all my time to suck?
Right, yeah.
You know, like I don't
agree.
mind sucking at things. Like jiu-jitsu, I'm terrible at jiu-jitsu, but I'm a lot better than I was. And as long as I can see that progress and chase progression, great. But if you give me a Rubik's Cube, like your kid was doing, I'm just going to sit there mad for a while because I've tried for 42 years to figure one of those out and I've never done it. So,
I can't do it either. I told him, he's trying to teach me and I'm like, you just give up, bud.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have whatever it takes.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, I can assess pretty quickly when it's not going to go very far, but when I'm into something and I can see that I can progress at it, I'm dedicated. I'm almost loyal to a fault. Like I don't give up on things.
Yeah. So you truly like you knew you were going to get it. Like when you did lifts, you're like you believed it that much.
Why would I ever see a lot of guys train to failure?
Yeah.
And again, I miss lifts. Don't misread me on that. I trained to not fail.
Right. Yeah.
In the gym. So when I get under a lift at the meet, and it's like, man, I was supposed to do 3 in this workout, but I was able to get 4. I was supposed to do 4 here, but you know, I got 4 and that was perfect. You build this confidence and it's like when you get to your meet and it's all mathematics. At the meet, everything is kind of like retro engineered to day one of your program to equal out to what you want to squat at the meet. Very, very mathematic. And if this adds up and this adds up and this adds up, well, that's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of situation I was in. Was like I created a training space for myself where I was going to be pushing at the threshold tiptoeing over the edge, and we were going to find the edge at the competition.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think that is the winning recipe though. Like it's such a, and it's like this podcast is an animal mindset. That is it. Like when you are competing or do whatever you do, it's not trying not to miss.
right?
It's trying to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in what I do, where people mess up is they start trying to protect and try to not miss what they're aiming at
Mm-hmm.
instead of focusing on how to hit it.
Yeah.
You know, and I just see so many. It's just so cool to see it applied in so many different things, even powerlifting.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to find that. I mean, one of the things that I did and kind of found through this was veteran outreach, working with guys that were transitioning back, and you know, a lot of guys have been blown up. A lot of guys had career-ending injuries and whatnot. So that was my way of serving the military, not serving in the military, but serving the military. These guys that were coming home like, hey, thanks for 20 years of service. Sorry about your leg, and go work at Home Depot for $15.
Right.
So I got involved with the Special Forces Foundation, the Recon Sniper Foundation, started doing some stuff, talking to those guys about like, man, I was literally on top of the world, #1, fell in a competition and, you know, out of the sport in a few years. Like, I get what you're going through, but I don't know what you're going through.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the buffer of me not being in the military or just the fact that I'd worked with the military in different regards as a strength coach. But man, wall after wall, these dudes just started talking to me. And those organizations started seeing some of that. And we're like, well, hey, come back, you know, talk to more guys. And I stayed in contact with more guys. So that really became a kind of a therapeutic thing for me, myself, because it's like, one, okay, I've done some really terrible stuff in my life. But two, everybody's got something.
Right.
Everybody's got stuff. And when I started meeting men that I looked at and I thought, man, you're a good person. You just made some mistakes. Well, you sing that song long enough, honestly, to other people, you have to turn it around on yourself at some point. So I started trying to forgive myself, started trying to dissect my life a little more honestly, not like you're a piece of shit, you know, but more like, how did you become a piece of shit? You know, how did you make these poor decisions? How did you turn your back on your
Did you have anything help you along that journey?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it depends on how deep you want to go, but I mean, it really just started probably from the point where I was at absolute zero, you know, putting a pistol in your mouth. Like, how did I get here? And the answer to that was 1,000 bad decisions. Like that's the thought that came in my head. Like 1,000 bad decisions put you here. Well, 1,001 good decisions will get you out. So that was the genesis. Like on my lowest point, that was what I kept thinking to myself. Make 1,001 good decisions and you'll get out of this hole. So it was a +1. That's where that mentality, that's where that saying, that's where that thought process came from. Because nobody wakes up, oh man, I want to go be a heroin addict today.
Right.
They lose their job. Their job stresses them out. They lose the money. The spouse gets mad or leaves or whatever. Dude's having a bad night. He gets drunk. Maybe hooks up with a hooker. She's got heroin, and now he's doing heroin. Like that's a real life story. That's a story that's been told to me by people, you know? So like my story wasn't that deep, but I had my own problems. I had my own holes that I dug by choosing poorly. And I could start retracting myself or retracing my steps and being like, man, if I'd have just done this.
Yeah.
And I knew better every single time. And that was it. Was like, am I just stupid? Did I just like cut off my nose to spite my own face all the time here? But start choosing better. And that's really what it came down to. Like, is this the best thing that I can drink right now, or is it an ice cold beer? Well, it's the water. I'd choose the beer, but I'm going to drink the water. You know, like stupid stuff like that.
Right,
but I had to make my life because I felt so internally out of control. I had to make that about every decision. And then
So
when
you
I
became super regimented, then
had to,
yeah.
I mean, you had to. When it's like if you're trying to corral a bull, you don't expand the fences, you bring them in, right? And that's exactly how I was with my behavior. My behavior had no limits, no bounds, because as the big bad power lifter that was tattooed and strong and winning meets, well, the night after the meet, let's go party and hang out and drink beers and do this. Well, I got to be that guy, and then I got to be this guy, and I got to be this guy. Had a friend of mine who's actually a psychology professor asked me one time, he was like, why'd you get all the tattoos? What do they mean? I started telling him, and he's like, it sounds like a lot of pain. I said, yeah, they're all tied to like bad memories and sad times and stuff. And he was like, do you ever think that you're literally wearing a jacket of pain and you're like trying to just hide yourself and cloak yourself in pain? And I was like, oh, what? But I was, because that was the things that got me mad, that got me driven to do the things because, man, I can see these 2 roses and I know the people that I lost. I can see these 2 roses and I know the 2 years of my life that I lost. Like I can see those things and I can get visceral anger from those things. So it's like, not only was my life that, but I was memorializing those things on my body. So it's kind of a weird trip to get to whenever you realize, man, I was
Yeah.
bringing those fences.
Do you regret that, or do you look at that now as like you kind of like a reminder of where you came from?
No, dude, I love my tattoos.
Yeah.
Like I absolutely love every one of them. And I've kind of made peace with those memories too. Cause
Yeah.
going back through this stuff, instead of being sad or mad that people are gone, it's like, damn, I had people for 30 years of my life that were awesome,
Yeah.
and it's just perspective.
Looking at
But a lot of that came through, I did some mushroom trips, I did some DMT, I did some ayahuasca, did a lot of those things, and I did them, and I really used to talk about them more openly, and I've been more cautious of it because it's almost become kind of like trendy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's talking about it that way. Man, I firmly believe that if you do it for a reason, it kind of adapts to whatever place you are in your head. Like if you just want to go have fun, music's going to sound good, food's going to taste good. But I think if you just do it haphazardly, you can get a lot of what you don't want.
mm-hmm.
Because I've had some of my first trips that I did were just kind of experimental by myself. And that's where Promontory came from. So it's funny that we came full circle on this. So Last of the Mohicans, when I was a kid, was like a really, really impactful movie to me. Like I loved it so much. Like watched it every day. But I watched it, and every night I would have nightmares of Magua, the Indian. Like I was terrified of him, terrified. So when I did my first mushroom trip, so I'm laying here on this floor. The carpet is actually a little more shag than this. It's kind of a tall shag.
Yeah.
I got French doors behind me, and I'm laying here, and I mean, I didn't know how much I took. I just took everything I had as far as the mushrooms, and it was a lot. So I'm like stratosphere, right? But I'm laying there, and I'm like very seriously, like I just thought to myself, man, this like my heart's racing right now because I can feel it. Like I can tell you what that apartment smelled like. I know exactly what the carpet felt like. It's funny how that works. It's like super intensely burned into your brain. But I started making this snow angel in the carpet. And I was like, oh my God, that feels so good. And it started to like come up and cocoon around me. So I'm looking at the moon and stars out the French door, like just, mystified by the whole universe at this point. And I think I've got like a carpet cocoon wrapped around me. Well, I'm laying on the floor butt naked.
Yeah.
I'd laid down in a towel. I took them and went in the shower, and I kind of laid on the floor, but I'd wiggled my way out of this towel. So I'm butt naked laying on the floor. And
On shrooms.
on shrooms, just chilling by myself.
Living life.
Third story. So I'm laying there and end up kind of looking out the window. And in my head, it was like I lifted towards space. But I was stuck between, like I was at ozone. I was looking down at blue sky below and black space above. This stardust cloud comes over, and it's 4 horseback Indians. And Magua is in the middle. And dude, I'm talking like, if it was God's face, it would have felt that, like, look at me. I am talking to you right to your soul kind of thing. He comes up to me, and he's got this bloody handprint on his face. And he's like, you've lost your warrior spirit. You've lost your way. You don't know where you're going. You have no direction. He said, go below to find above. And hit me in the face with that bloody hand. Dude, I went 1,000 feet under the ocean. In my head. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know which way I'm swimming. It feels like I'm going up, but I'm only going down. Feels like I'm losing air, like I'm suffocating.
I was gonna say, are you panicking?
Oh my God, dude, like out of control. And I can feel it right now. So finally, I get my orientation and I see this little pinhole of light. I'm swimming, swimming, not getting any bigger. And I can still feel myself holding my breath. Like, I think I'm going to die. And it's like, you have to know you're going to die. So I kept swimming. And when I stopped trying so hard, when I stopped trying to swim, and I'm just like, I can't. Everything blew up. I'm in a field. Everything is like the brightest, most beautiful color you've ever seen in your life. Like more intense and beautiful than you can even, like, the colors smelled. They were so good. Like, whatever, like, yellow was like banana nut bread.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it was
Right.
that good.
Yeah.
But I was black. I was black as coal. Had no facial features, had no nothing. I was just a silhouette of this big man, right? Walking through the fields like Gladiator almost, like, just can't believe this is real. Like, what's going on? And as soon as I kind of just knelt down and was like, I'm not going to walk anywhere. I'm just going to sit here for a minute. I became colorful. I became like a part of that. And that was my whole life. Like, I was always trying so hard to get somewhere that I thought I should be. When I stopped, I found out exactly where I was.
Yeah. Just gotta be in the moment.
Yeah. And that sounds so silly and cliche, but dude, that rocked me. Like, it rocked me to my core,
Right.
you know? So shortly after that, I made some good decisions, some business decisions that paid off and kind of got me back on track. So I kind of shied away from that stuff for a little bit. But then, I don't know, around 17, 18, 19, kind of got back into it more of like, okay, I'm in a good place now. What can the benefit of this be? And, you know, I've done it a few times since, and every time I figure out a little bit more about myself, I'll leave with questions to ask myself. But, you know, I think it just showed me a side of myself in ways that words couldn't say,
Mm-hmm.
or a movie couldn't make you feel. Like,
Yeah.
it had to take me through this place where I felt like I was drowning.
I've heard some crazy stories about
Yeah.
some of those journeys, dude. Just like, and to your point, it was all dependent on the headspace.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Oh, I've had some really
they're
bad
so
ones.
bad that's
Yeah.
like you're in a bad headspace. But when you're in a good one, it's been like the most incredible like finding event of their life.
Yeah, I definitely say when you're in a better place, you're kind of going the right direction. You get a lot more of that love type message, you know, like that feeling. Again, not trying to glamorize or make this sound like the cool thing to do. Like, that I was at the verge of not wanting
Right.
to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to say one thing too. So if anybody out there has ever listened to this and you're in that space of not wanting to live, ask yourself, is that the question, or is it, do you not want to live like this?
Right.
And that was my answer. I wanted to live, because when dude, I was ready. Like, I'd made my mind up, but I couldn't do it because I was like, I don't want to do this. So I just need to stop living in a way that's making me feel like this.
Was there ever a time like you're in that like growing up or during your struggle, did you have like faith, like, or was that something that came along? Because I know me and you've talked about that a little
Man,
bit.
I have a very interesting relationship with God and spirituality. I think growing up, I was probably exposed, like so many people, to. I mean, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. It was like everything you did was putting you in hell. Like,
Right.
every single thing was going to send you to hell. So I kind of resisted that. But there was an incident with a teacher that kind of accused me of being a part of some just boys will be boys trouble stuff, you know. And really, it's nothing, but I just don't want to say anymore because of her and the place and my mom. It's small
Yeah.
town stuff. So, nevertheless, it's such a silly thing, but man, it changed the whole direction of my life, because she came in and she told my mom that I had done this thing, and my mom, just like as any mom would do, she's like, I can't believe you did that. I'm so embarrassed, dude. When my mom said that to me, it broke my heart.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I'd let her down in front of God. You know what I mean? Like, and even though I didn't do it, I was begging her to believe me, and she's like, no, you're just a little liar. You know, like that kind of thing. And she was just mad, embarrassed,
Yeah.
whatever. But dude, it stuck with me. So I started realizing that, like, look, don't tell them the truth, just tell them what they want to hear. You know, and
Yeah.
that became kind of my MO with my mom and dad. Just like, yeah, I'm not going to my friend's house. I'm just going to go to bed. 5 minutes later, I'm out the window, kind of thing. But my granny, man, she was rock solid. Like, she never really just sat and like hemmed and hawed on the Bible a lot. But she threw out a Bible verse here and there or whatever. But she always wore a cross necklace, and she lived. Like, if I could tell somebody how to live like that woman.
Mm-hmm.
But she modeled that after God, and she modeled that after the Bible, and living in a way that was humble and kind and loving. So I got good doses of what I perceived as God through my granny, through my nana, through my papa, like people like that. But I, because of my own feelings about church, did not revisit that for years and years and years. Through some of this stuff, you know, when I started getting out in nature, that's where I started to feel connected to God. Was like,
Yeah.
you don't need necessarily. I knew the Bible. I'd read the Quran. I'd read books on Hinduism and on Buddhism. So I had really tried to find an answer that would kind of like calm this storm. You know what I mean? And for me, I go out in the woods, and it's like you're just forced to see the things that work in harmony and balance and those kind of things. And that's where, I do talk to God in that situation. I do talk to God in a way that allows me to connect with all that I'm in. And it really does become like my form of God is a biblical God. My form of God is the Father of Jesus Christ. Like that is the way that I was raised. That is the way that I think. But it took a lot of years to kind of figure out how it would work for me in a way that made sense, because it wasn't getting screamed at from the pulpit. You know what I mean? And I still struggle so hard sometimes with like, how can all this stuff happen on this earth
Mm-hmm.
if this is divine intervention or divine design? We need a divine intervention. Like, how can this be going on? So that's one of my things that I struggle with, and I admire, that you guys, forefront of your existence is your faith, and like,
Yeah.
I admire that, because it's like, as much as I feel and as much as I, have searched and looked, it's like I juggle that so hard still. Like, I feel very, very connected, very, very convinced sometimes. And then the other side of me that just questions everything is like, why do these things happen?
I
Why do
think
these?
that's a natural thing.
Oh, I
You
think
know what?
For sure.
Because
I mean, if you say you never question anything,
100%.
but like faith has been a huge part of my life, and I've never. Obviously, I have struggles, but we've had different struggles.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I could tear up right now thinking about just like how like that personal relationship with Jesus Christ for me has been like what got me through everything, right? And so it is a struggle because there's so many unanswered things here on earth. And it's like, how do I explain that to somebody? Or how do I even understand it myself? Where you watch terrible things happen to little kids, or just terrible things happen to good people. And it's like, there's no way that we can understand like the plan.
Yeah.
It's no way, because it doesn't make sense to us. Like, how can this happen?
Well,
But it's like,
Maggie my wife's a pediatric oncology nurse, and every other week I feel like she's coming home like there's a 2-year-old that just died of cancer.
Yeah.
Or she came home last week. I was on the road and they got news that this little 9-year-old little girl was gonna be dying.
Yeah.
She hadn't accepted it yet. Her parent. I was telling him like, God, they got to get her out of
yeah,
this.
that's like,
And it's you think about things like that, because I'm super strong in my faith, and I know, but then I say it's natural because I want people to know like it's part of it, of
Yeah.
looking at that being like, gosh, how
Well,
can this happen? But I don't think we can, to your point, there's no way we can understand the dynamic of really.
Yeah, and I grew up the same way, where you felt like, to have a relationship with Jesus or to be saved, to have faith, you had to be perfect. Almost like if you listen to country music, you're going to hell. If you drink a beer, you're going to hell. And it's like, once you got older, it's like, man, that's your own convictions that were thrown on everybody else, right? And it's like, I think you have personal convictions, things that people struggle with, and like that might be your conviction, or like even in the Bible, like, because my dad has been and my mom were like a rock in faith, like, and I grew up in that, and I knew the Bible, but it didn't mean I didn't have questions, and I didn't get saved or accept Jesus in my life till I was later, grown in my 20s, and I sat in a church my whole life, but I still didn't have that personal relationship, and I still was just turmoil in my head, and I had no peace in my life. And I didn't really have it at all until, finally I had broke down and just surrendered my life, not to be perfect, because I'm far from it, but I just surrendered my life to say, you can have it. And like, you have to die daily, because I still struggle with temptations and wanting attention and all the stupid things. It's like, God, take this away from me.
Yeah.
Why do I still struggle with this stuff? These like human nature stuff. I just don't want it, right? But I still, like, every day I have to face it. And some days it gets me, and I was like, I'm sorry. And then I'm the type of person who wants to take the wheel, like take control. I want to drive my own life here. And then when I need you, I'll reach out. And he's just always like, hey, reel me back in. And it's like, you need me every day, you know, and that's my relationship with him. And it's just been, you know, I am very humbled in the way I am because I know how imperfect I am, right? I'm like, I am so far from perfect, the things that go through my head, and like how it's just almost like, God, I don't deserve anything, you know.
Right.
And that's the way I feel. But I think also the devil is a liar, you know, and he'll try to discourage you so many ways, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think I think the world itself is becoming a form of the devil. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
in the sense that everything is just modeled around the idea of, oh, it's all about making you feel good. It's all about right here and right now. There's no delayed gratification. It's all just feel, feel, feel,
Mm-hmm.
feel, feel. And to equate that to something else that I'm trying to understand, but I love very much, is jujitsu. And a friend of mine who's an instructor, Mitch McElroy, he has a saying, I want to create a primal reaction to my martial maneuver.
Yeah.
So the thing about that is, I think we as people, if we always defaulted to the primal, well, yeah, we're going to be drunks and we're going to have
Mm-hmm.
endless sex and we're going to fall apart at the seams. You know, like that's proven. The
Yeah.
societies that fall to that, to the lowest form of what a human can be, they fall. I think that's where it's like a martial spirituality, where that is a choice, that is an awareness, that is a decision that I am going to choose opposite of what
Mm-hmm.
my gut tells me or what my heart is telling me or whatever. It's like just because those things are telling you, yeah, you probably would feel better if you went and had the cheeseburger. Well, you probably would feel better if you went and had sex with 10 women
The
every month.
blueberry
You know,
muffin.
That
like
was good.
you put whatever thing in front of there, like whatever your vice or your
Yeah.
desire is, of course it's going to feel better than not doing.
Right.
It. You know
Well,
what
I
I
think
mean?
if you look to your point, it's like you keep seeing things that weren't normal.
Yeah.
It just slowly becomes
Dude, it's
more
not
and
slowly
more and
anymore.
more.
Like,
But now we're at a place where it's just like,
Well, what used to hide in the shadows is walking around the broad daylight now.
Yeah.
It's
and
like,
everybody's cool with it.
yeah.
so let me ask you this, guys, from another faith-based question here. I've read Revelations from a research study level, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I do not claim to be a master about it. I just wrote a couple
Right, yeah.
papers about it.
Yeah.
But some of the predictive things, you know, the climate stuff, the unrest, the wars, and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you guys take on that from a faith standpoint, and then to remove the faith standpoint, just as a person watching the world, kind of as it is standpoint?
It is.
I think I operate just like, you know, and to go back to the point, I grew up the exact same way y'all did.
Yeah.
And then I went to a Christian private school and played football, and it was like church on Tuesday, church on Thursday.
Yeah.
To the point where I got to the place where it's like, I don't want nothing to do with this.
Right.
I'm
Right.
done with it. I don't want to hear about it. I go home, you know, they'd be like, let's go to church. No, I'm out. I'm good. I don't want it. And kids, my wife and my kids kind of transition me back over of like, I gotta be a
Right.
good leader in my home. And there's only one way to do that. But since then, I've tried to adopt this, like, everything around us is not great in the way direction it's going. But it's like, to say when God's going to come back, nobody really knows. There are all these predictive things. And it's like, I just want to live in a way of like, whenever it happens, let's go.
Be ready.
Yeah.
But it's like, I agree. Like it looks, and it is crazy how the Bible like prophesies all the things.
Yeah.
That it's like, wow, thousands of years ago. It's like, look, none of it is wrong.
Right.
It's like, what more do you
There
need?
is no controversial things. It's like, that ain't happen. It's like, it could come back right now. And it's like, it could happen, you know.
Yeah.
But it's also a thing where since I was 5 years old, it's the
coming.
end time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
You know, but I think what it is, it just steadily gets worse with every generation. But what does it look like if we go another 50 years or 100 years? Like eventually the human race cannot sustain the direction we're headed.
Did you ever hear about Universe 25? Have you ever heard of that?
Uh-uh.
It's a pretty unique study that they did on a colony of mice, and they basically took 300 mice and put them in the like society, and then they bred, and over time, these things and these changes in the mice started to happen to where, I mean, I don't even want to say this stuff because
Yeah.
it parallels
Say it.
society just
Yeah.
so much today, to where some of the females were bullying certain, like the alpha males. Like this situation happened where the women would bully, the female rats would bully the alpha male rats, the dominant rats, and only breed with the lesser males. Like they somehow switched this thing in there. You should look into it. It's really interesting, really confusing, but it's like, if mice follow this program and these people understood what mice would do, and you start looking at who did the funding for this stuff and figure out when it was done, they were planning to I think, to kind of convince people to follow some of these norms that were in this practice, because marketing, which is, as we all know, we're involved in marketing, you're trying to lead people, hopefully to something good. But how easy are people to lead if you have the right song and dance and ill intention?
Yeah, and
It's
they're
the
weak.
easiest.
And people are weak.
Sex, drugs, rock and roll. You make
Yeah.
those things a part of your product, you're going to sell it every day.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I didn't know the name of it, but I'd heard of that study for sure.
Yeah.
And it's scary, dude. I mean, it is, and it mirrors what we are seeing so much in our society. But, I think it's another thing where, like, if you watch the news, which I don't, or if you literally just see everything goes on around, you can get in a bad place quickly.
Oh, for sure. I have to.
Yeah.
I have to be clear of it, just because I am a feeler. I'm a person that thinks and feels a lot. So I dwell on stuff, man. Like, I get fired up. Like, let's go do something about this. Well, I can't do anything about this. Nobody else will do anything about this. Then
I
get
quit
pissed.
watching it. I quit watching it altogether.
Oh, same. Yeah, I can't, because when I live in my world with my family, my friends, in the outdoors, like, obviously, like, you don't see it and you don't live in that negative bubble all the time. Obviously, we have to be real. If World War III happens and all of a sudden there's a war going on in Uniontown here, it's like, okay, I'm not going to go for a walk with my kids. I've got to fight,
Yeah.
But I'm saying, I'm not going to sit and watch people that just want us to hate each other all day long, and they're
Right.
constantly trying to distract you from something over here. It's like all smoke and mirrors, and I don't trust any of them anymore.
That's the thing, is it's so hard to have any qualitative ground underneath your feet as to what to believe on that front. Like,
For sure.
that's why you have to start believing. Like, what do you believe for yourself?
Yeah.
What do I define for myself, my family, my friends, my people? Like,
Yeah.
that's what's really starting to matter. And I think people are shifting back to that.
I agree.
I really do, because some of the conversations I've had have been heartbreaking, tough, but we've got some good conversations happening too. Like, people are getting motivated. People are starting to, like,
Yeah.
tune that stuff out and do their own thing. So I think it's good.
Well, dude, we could sit here and talk to you about, I want to have you back. I know, like, you got a long day planned, so do we, but I want to talk to you on the next one about the cube method.
Yep.
I want to talk to you about nutrition. I want to talk to you about hunting. We didn't get into any of that stuff today, man, but I mean, we could literally make this a 2-part series and have Brandon Lilly back on the podcast.
Well, I hope it was good. I mean, like, I kind of rambled about myself.
Dude, I've enjoyed it. I didn't say much, but, like, you're a very interesting, genuine guy that I have just, like, really admired since the beginning, since we met, because there's not many real people,
Yeah.
that are just lay it all out there. This is me. Everybody's a highlight reel.
Yeah.
And I've always appreciated that about you. So,
Well, I hope they like the dirty junkyard dog for a highlight reel, because that's me. I'm just holding on for dear life.
no, man, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming, dude.
Oh, dude, I wouldn't miss it. And really, thank you for the doors you've opened for me, man. And really, you too, Joe. Like, I mean, just the people that you guys have helped me meet and things. It's been awesome.
No, we got more ahead.
Yeah.
Awesome.